The whole idea is our product is a tool, right? It's meant to streamline your process and help your employees, not replace your employees.
Welcome to Where Are My Customers? Brought to you by AeroChat and produced by Stridex.
Hey, Dipansh, my man. Welcome to our podcast.
Hello, nice to be here.
Hey, so thanks for taking the time. And, ever since I got to hear more about what you do at Maju, right? I mean, it's very fascinating. And I think on separate occasions, I have told you that I was inspired by some of the things that you guys have done. And that translates into some of the work that we are doing, right? But for the audience who might be, new to seeing you and not, know who you are, can you just give us a quick intro of, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So, for anyone that hasn't heard of Maju or hasn't seen me around before, I'm one of the founders at Maju. What Maju basically is a tech-enabled service company, right? So we specialize in people operations. So basically, at its very core, it's HR tech that comes with services along any part of HR, right? So right from recruitment to onboarding your employees to managing the employees, giving you the right tools to manage the employees, offboarding the whole shebang, and of course payroll outsourcing as well, right? So that's kind of a quick 1-2 line summary of what Maju's all about. And of course, we're gonna go a bit more in depth in this conversation as well.
For sure. But, but as you are saying it, as you're describing it yourself, I kind of just realized that previously, when I first got to know you and Maju, right? The thing that obviously stuck in my head, right? And I'm sure that's kind of the main selling point that you guys push as well, which is the HR software on WhatsApp. At least that's how I keep remembering it. But now as you describe it, it feels actually like a full, for lack of a better term, a full BPO kind of business that is catered towards HR. Maybe you can share a bit more about like that. How do you actually position the business?
Right. So I guess then you need a little bit of a background and a story to how all that happened, right? So
That's all I'm asking.
So originally, actually, we were more focused on enterprise companies, MNCs, and we were working with foreign banks, foreign universities, some local universities as well. And we originally actually started out with AI recruitment CRM, right? So back then, Maju was known as Vita Verified, right? And back then, we were looking at trying to solve problems specifically in recruitment, right? So we started on enterprise sales, literally from scratch, by the way. There was no playbook, no processes, and it was a complete blank slate. It was just a couple of guys looking to get shit done and, break the mold, right? That was the whole idea. So we implemented our own processes, learned the hard way that enterprise sales is really no easy game, right? You need 7 to 8 touch points to get a response, building everything from a sales wiki to templates on security standards. We built our own HR tech knowledge base as well, and that sort of stuff. And then from there, over time, of course, we realized that enterprise sales takes way too long, and the whole co-founding team, being in our early to mid 20s at that point, we're all very impatient people. Honestly,
I'm still impatient.
So I guess that never really goes away, right? So
Yes.
we felt like we were doing more educating than actual selling at that point, right? Especially because back when we were doing this, AI and HR was still a very new concept for recruiters, right? So we wanted something that had more impact, more scalability, right? So we looked at a bit of a pivot, right? And that's where the idea for Maju was born, right? Because when you look at HR tech specifically for SMEs within this region, in the last 10, maybe even 20 years, right, there's been almost no innovation, right? And the problems that people had at the very beginning are still the problems that people are facing now, right? And the number one problem that we realize is adoption, right? Because a HR software is the only software that a company will ever adopt that affects every single employee, right? Although if you have your accounting software that's just for finance, your CRM is just for sales, HR is for everybody, right? So going from enterprise to SME sales, honestly, it felt like we were shifting from marathon to sprinting.
totally different skill set, right? Totally different mentality.
Completely different. So at that point, we had to rebuild everything, right? But this time, of course, we knew what was going to work for us. That meant, of course, we set up a new sales wiki. We built our own sort of CRM to have our own custom workflows, discovery guidelines, objection handling, all that sort of stuff. And that's when we actually, honestly, at the very beginning, didn't even know where to begin with the product, right? So what I ended up doing is for about 3 to 4 months, I'm literally walking around the country, knocking on doors, right? And just doing that research, right? See what issues people are actually facing, why they adopted what they adopted, if they haven't adopted something, why they haven't adopted something. And that adoption problem was the main thing that we saw, right? So that's when we sat down and we're like, okay, how can we improve adoption as the biggest issue in HR right now? And then honestly, it was something that felt a lot like common sense after we thought of it. But before we came up with this idea, nobody had ever done it, where it was the statistic that we had back then was about 98% of the workforce in this region has used or does use WhatsApp. Right. So that's where that idea of, hey, maybe a chat-based HRIS might be the solution here. That's how that idea was born.
Yeah.
Right. So we started looking into it and we realized that, if we're looking at smaller SMEs, then of course WhatsApp is perfect. Right. But as companies grow, as companies scale, then maybe you're looking at things like Slack, like Teams, right? And for maybe the small to mid-sized one, on top of WhatsApp, Telegram is also an option. Right. So that's when we were looking, hey, if it's easy enough to build this, that could be the innovation that this space really needs. And that's why we started looking into the WhatsApp side. And I think the first time we met as well, that introduction that you got from our mutual connection was that, hey, these guys do everything on WhatsApp.
Yes.
Right. So that was the whole sort of story behind why we looked at Marju as a product in the first place, and why that chat-based access became our biggest USP.
Yeah, and that was a revelation, and I share this a couple of times with you every time I see you, and probably with some of our, fellow startup friends in the community, right?
Yep.
When I saw that, and again, I came from rather traditional programming background, your classical software development. And every time it's, you need to put a UI on it. You need to put a UI on it. And you already know UI is probably sometimes can be an even bigger challenge than the actual functional development itself.
100%.
So when I saw you demoing on, doing the demo on WhatsApp, I'm like, this is crazy. Why? Exactly like what you say. On hindsight, it makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
But until you hit that revelation, until you hit that realization, it would no, it didn't occur. Yeah, it didn't register. So that was fantastic. But I want to bring back to something else earlier that you said, because it's something new to me, and I thought it was interesting because you mentioned that it didn't started with Marju. It started with an AI recruitment software, right? Yeah. So and there's quite a fair bit of things to unpack inside. I think for a lot of businesses and even startups or entrepreneurs who wants to start something, right? Why did you guys started with so that means bring me back all the way to the genesis of it, right? Yeah. Why did you guys want to start, the business, and why do you want to start a product, and why AI recruitment to begin with?
Yeah. Okay. So if we're going all the way back, when we started, right, that AI recruitment CRM actually wasn't even our first product, right? So
Wow.
I mean, as you would know, and I mean for the viewers as well, right?
Yeah.
The company was originally incubated in SMU, because they've got a fantastic innovation program,
right,
over at SMU, right? So when we first started there, when we went through that application process of getting the company incorporated, getting into that program, there was already a gap there that immediately we thought, okay, maybe we could solve this, right?
Right.
Because you've got, for example, if you and I have worked together in the past and we've had a mentor, right? Normally, when you apply for any of these sort of programs, or even for jobs, you will do things like your background checks, you'll do reference checks, you'll do psychometric assessments. And as a standalone, none of these are actually genuinely useful. Right? So that's when we started formulating the idea of, hey, how do you then judge people and how they work together in a team in a professional environment? Right? So then we started looking into how we could potentially help incubators and accelerators with these application processes. And then we basically, that first product that we built was a mix of a psychometric assessment and a reference check, but it was the first of its kind in the world, right? Where it was a joint reference psychometric assessment, where the mentor that we worked with in the past can now answer about 30 to 35 questions about how he or she perceives us as a team in a working environment, right? So that was the original first product that we started with, simply because it was an issue we saw in that process.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. And we built out that product. Of course, SMU naturally was our first client for that one.
Yes.
And then we realized that, hey, scalability is an issue with this, right? Because when you look at that market,
Right.
incubators and accelerators is a really small market, right? Even if you get every single one in the region, that's still not a big enough scale, right? So then we started looking at who else could use a product like this, right? And naturally, recruitment was the answer there. But in recruitment, you don't need a joint assessment, right? You need individual person. So then we started looking into how we could pivot that product into something that could be used in recruitment.
Right.
And that's where that AI recruitment CRM idea was born, where we realized that every single company that could use something like this already has your base recruitment software, right? Which is your applicant tracking system,
Yes.
ATSs. And ATSs, at least back then, of course, there's been a lot of developments in that space now. But when we were first building this out, ATS systems were basically keyword matching.
Yeah.
And if your candidate doesn't get selected, they get lost in that pit of the ATS.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And when you work with MNCs, these guys have got tens of thousands of profiles in their ATS. And a lot of them, we realize, end up paying for agencies, or when you open a new job role and you're looking for new candidates, these profiles are already in your database, right? But you're paying more to what? Resurface them? Doesn't make sense, right? So that's why I called it an AI recruitment CRM, right? Because it basically acted as an add-on to your ATS, integrated with it, and instantly repurposed every single profile from your past roles for current hiring.
Right. Okay.
So that was that idea, and we wanted to take it further than just your basic keyword matching. Like a lot of softwares nowadays, right? When you look at recruitment, they call it AI recruitment, but all the AI is doing is taking your job description and pulling out the keywords in your search, right?
Yeah.
That's the extent of the AI. But we wanted to take it further, right? So we looked at how we could do that and then incorporate AI in the next process as well to remove that keyword matching. So that's where we started looking at things like contextualizing resumes, right? Essentially understanding that, hey, within things like sales, right? You've got so many different titles and terms that people use, from inside sales to SDR to BDR to account management, account executive, sales executives. And if you're looking at keyword matching and the JD says experience in, let's say, account management, right? But my resume says sales executive working with key accounts.
Yeah.
That's not gonna get pulled out.
Yeah.
Right? And even within recruitment, you've got recruiters and consultants in recruitment agencies. The role is the same. Title is wildly different. So how do you then understand that this means the same thing? Right? So that's where that contextualization came in, right? Understanding that, hey, maybe a consultant that used to work at Charterhouse has the same experience as a recruiter that works at maybe something like Aon. Right? So that's what that contextualization did. And essentially, we used the entire database that they had. The moment a new role goes live, that whole database is then combed through
Right.
to find relevant candidates for that new position, right? So then, of course, things like your candidate experience improve vastly, right? Because if someone who doesn't get a job, maybe you go through the interview stage, you reach the final round, and another candidate just edges you up.
Yep.
Doesn't mean that first candidate was bad.
Right.
It just wasn't a right fit at that time.
Yeah.
So now imagine going back to that person maybe in 3 to 4 weeks and calling them and be like, hey, I have another role that might work for you. We already have all your info. You can skip the initial stages and go right into the final stage again. Right? As a candidate, you'd feel that much more valued, right? You'd want to go back and work for that company. So that was the idea there. And of course, there were more features like, AI email writer and stuff like that within this as well, right? To save time.
Yeah.
But then again, enterprise sales is a very, very long game. And
So the kind of the that the deal breaker for you guys for that, because the way you say you got to a point where the product was already out, right? You have an MVP out and it's getting some traction. You have a couple of customers, but you're looking at and the deal breaker, as I'm hearing it, is too much of a challenge getting enterprise sales.
So that was a part of it, right? Definitely, because it's a long game, right? You can put maybe a year's worth of effort into a deal, and company could have a hiring freeze.
Yep.
And that falls through.
Right.
Right? It's completely not even in our control
Yes.
for that company to be hiring or in a hiring freeze.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the second part of it that really was the final nail in the coffin for us was what I mentioned earlier about us having to do more education. Right? Because at that point, people weren't adopting AI as readily. The AI wave wasn't at its peak where it is now. Right? So telling people that, hey, you can actually do this and it takes away maybe 80% of your grunt work. Right? For them, it was like, hey, actually, what if this then replaces me? What if I lose my job?
Right.
Right? So then that education portion became a bit too taxing in that sense. So we wanted something that was, again, more scalable, quicker results, and at the same time gave immediate results to the client.
Here's the interesting thing, because quite a number of founders that I spoke with, some of them exited founders, so they have the experience. And I think one of them, Chris from Hi-Fi, they're doing recruitment, right? He recently posted on LinkedIn as well. He was saying that, if given a choice, he will always go after the enterprise segment. And I commented and I disagreed. We had a bit of friendly crossfire there.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to get at is, and you come from this spectrum, you having gone through, enterprise, and you are also saying that, hey, you know what, this is just way too long, right? I'd rather do SME. What's your take now that you have gone through both? Because there is also a big argument why some of these exited founders talk about going out to enterprise is because the ticket is
size.
much bigger, right?
Yes.
And you probably rather have 10, 20 high value clients that gives you that baseline cash flow and revenue, rather than have 1,000 clients to deal with, right? You are now in a position where you have crossed both spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back, what's your take?
Honestly, for a product that is more widely accepted already, something that doesn't need as much education, I think I'd agree with them, right? Because it definitely makes it more worth your time to spend that 8 months to 10 months to maybe even a year getting that massive ticket size. But at the same time, if you have to go through the education phase and you realize that there's a lot of things that aren't in your control, then you lose out. Right? So I would say it very much depends on the product and the industry that you're in. But having said that, these guys are very much correct, right? Because when you're looking at a SaaS-based product, right, when you're working with SMEs, ticket sizes are way smaller than enterprise. And that's where you need something to add on to that SaaS, right? To make that entire process, albeit it's a shorter process, right? For sure. Like there's no argument there, but having something to add on to the software that increases your ticket size as well, right? So it makes it that much more worthwhile, which is why then we opened up the services wing.
Yeah.
Right? So you have the services that are powered by the software, and then that, of course, multiplies that ticket size by 5 to 6 times easily.
So you guys actually, as you transitioning through it, right, it's product, then you hit onto module, and you realize that, oh, now I have a product that I can scale, and I have a product that I'm going to hit on, but then you still have to scale up a service component. So in a sense, you guys are operating less of a software as a service, more as service as a software. In that sense,
you could say that. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, but at which point do you kind of figure out or realize that I can't just depend on pure product? And the reason I'm asking this is because, again, when we were building out AeroChat, right?
Yeah.
A few people came to us and say, why don't you just do a full-blown BPO solution that is powered by, your AeroChat product? Then you're like doing a complete solution. and that was something that was suggested to us a while back. I mean, at this point, we are still pretty much product focused. But in your case, again, having walked this journey, right? Where was the trigger point for you to consider, okay, I need to expand this instead of just being product specific or product centric?
Yeah. So for us, it really just stemmed from the fact that the founding team here were not just looking to build a product and quickly exit. Right. I mean, fair enough. It's a very common thing for startup founders to do, right? Because that's the path that's been beaten for us already. But we're looking to build something that's more of like a legacy, right? So that means that sustainability while you scale is that much more important, right? So that's purely how we looked at, if we're going to be scaling the software, but we want it to be sustainable in the long run, there needs to be something on top of the software, right? And I'm not sure if you will face this as AeroChat continues growing the way it has, right? But for sustainability, that might be a route that you need to go down, right? Because these people that gave you that advice and asked you, hey, what would you consider doing this, or are you already doing this, have probably seen that same thing that we saw when we made that addition to the software. But now I'm very curious, right? Because you brought it up. Is that something that you'll consider doing moving forward?
To be honest, at this point, not really. Okay, so the people who have shared with us, right, are exited founders, and some of them are also consultants in the startup space, or they have been part of some very explosive growth startups, right? So when they were looking at our entire positioning, they were suggesting that why don't you sell a BPO solution, right?
Right.
I think at the time when I was getting those advice, the timing was probably not right for me to fully dive into it, because at that moment we were still trying to work out some of the key features of the product.
Yeah.
So I'm like, my product hasn't even sharpened yet, and then to think about the expansion part, into a service, added on to the solution, probably feels a bit too premature to think about it. That was one thing. The other one is, the people who are giving me that feedback are not my actual users.
Yeah.
My actual users have never said that to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's also kind of why I asked you, because, like you mentioned about going to talk to users, like, weeks and months of talking to users. And I think that's the crux of it, right? That's the value part, because those are the people who's going to eventually pay you money, right? What we have kind of understood from the users that we have talked to, the prospects that we have talked to, one of the key drivers of why they want to use an AI chatbot is to reduce customer service costs.
100%.
Right? And it makes total sense. Which is why they never come to us and talk about the additional, BPO support. Because if they are to get additional BPO support from us, the service cost goes up. Then it kind of defeats the purpose of why are you even considering an AI chatbot to begin with?
Right.
So I think that it's that contradictory mindset. So we haven't really heard any of our users talk about that bracket, and I think that's probably the main reason why we are at the moment still fundamentally more of a product centric solution rather than thinking about expanding out. Yeah.
But in that case, would you say that what you just explained, right, about how adding that service brings that cost back up, wouldn't that mainly apply to already established companies with established customer service teams? Like if you're looking at, for example, growing companies, right, or SMEs, even certain mid-sized companies where the customer service team hasn't been fully set up, right? Wouldn't that service then allow them to cut costs in the long run? Because you, as that service, set it up for them, right? You manage it for them, which means they don't have to hire, they don't have to plan anything, they don't have to go and execute their plans for customer service. Would that potentially be that segment later on?
That's an interesting point. I think what I can speak to, right, is the current customers and use cases that we have talked to, right? One of them is, I think, similarly, I think it goes back to the whole enterprise versus SME debate, right? We were also advised that, we should go after some of the big names, right? Like for us, we focus on e-commerce customer service, right? So
Right.
the logical thinking is, okay, go after a few big brands, right? Some of the top consumer brands. If they adopt your chatbot,
You're good to go.
you make your mark, right? And we did actually talk to a few really solid names in the market.
Right.
But like you said, the entire deliberation period is
Too
6 months, 9 months down the road. I'm like, how am I going to just survive on, pinning the hopes on that kind of deals, right?
Yeah.
So eventually and I think it also stems from our mission. If we look at what we really want to do, right? What we really want to do is to liberate this whole idea of customer service. It's not just about your big BPO team. It's not just about having a big call center to service. What if the technology of the day are able to eliminate like a good chunk of it, right? Obviously, it's beneficial for the big enterprises that has the muscle to do it. But more importantly, the technology now can also be compartmentalized and packed into a very easily plug and play solution. SMEs don't have to worry about trying to figure this out. They can go and focus on the branding, the marketing, the focus of the business. But now the customer service now is, in one little compact box. Right out of the gate is a deployable solution. And then you are able to let more SMEs, more businesses have the ability to engage their customers better, improving that communication process just by a snap of the finger. So that's actually where we are, I suppose you can call that the purpose or the why of, why we are doing this, is to actually broaden that spectrum.
Yeah, I mean that totally makes sense as well, right? And growing, how's the experience been growing the team to do this as well, right? Because if you're purely on the SaaS model, or then your team can be that much more lean as well, right? Because you don't need that many more people to service your clients or to build the software. How's that experience been for you?
Yes. So even for us, right, with what we are doing for our customers, we are also walking the talk, and we are also, from a cultural perspective, in terms of development, software, the programming side, we're also incorporating more AI into our processes. And obviously you can see, the timeline, the rollout, the shipping duration shorten.
Of course.
So that's one thing. I think one of the best part about having an AI-driven customer service is the insights.
Okay.
Because now you're not basing your judgment on gut feel. You're not basing on,
right.
I heard of this customer a while back, or I talked to this guy. So previously when you talk about customer feedback, or we talk about the kind of questions or interest that your customer have, a lot of times it is very anecdotal, right? It's very case by case, scenario wise, right? But when you have all this going through a chatbot solution, right? All the information is digitized, and then we can pull the insights. So across a period of time, we would know what are the most common topics, that our users are interested in, and that drives a fair bit of the product feature decision. That drives a fair bit of how we adjust our marketing message over time.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, yeah,
as it should be, right? Because you can get advice from anyone, right? Just walking down the street, you could talk to someone about your company and they'll have their own opinion on it.
Yeah.
But going from your customers' feedback always makes the most sense, right?
Yes.
If they are facing issues, or they feel like, hey, having this additional feature will make my life that much easier.
Yeah.
Then that's a no-brainer, right?
And in fact, whenever people, talk to me about, a chatbot solution, and I think it's a very common trope. You probably heard this before. Like a lot of people say, oh, but isn't a chatbot robotic, and shouldn't it be more personalized and things like that, right? And this is always the question that I love to counter most, because no, seriously, no. Your users don't really care whether your chatbot answers in a robotic tone or not. They really don't. They just want an answer that is accurate and relevant and fast. And we have the data to prove it. Our clients that install AeroChat, right off the gate, 90% of all queries that comes in get resolved by the AI without having to go to a human.
Oh wow, okay, that's
Right.
impressive.
So right off the gate, that's you're reducing the amount of stress and pressure and workload on your customer service agents by 90%. Now, does that mean that then, okay, you scrap your customer service team? No, you don't do that. In
Of course
fact,
not.
one of our use cases, right, the reason why they want to buy into an AI chat facility is because they have different tiers of clientele. So they want to use the AI portion to handle like 70-80% of the general subscribers. And then they have a select list of VIP clients. And the VIP clients is where they want the humans to pay full attention. So that makes perfect sense, right? You allocate your resources based on the exact requirement of your client segment. But you don't have to spread them equally across, which is just inefficient.
Yeah, I mean, it's your typical 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But of course, I have also come across customers who are like adamant about, oh, if I can implement this, I'll immediately fire 2 to 3 workers. I'm like, okay, maybe not that fast.
Yeah. You do have to experiment with it. You got to try it out.
Yes.
And when you hear, I don't know, this is just me, right? If I hear a client saying, if I adopt your software and I'm going to immediately fire 2 or 3 people,
Yeah.
is that really the kind of company you want to be working with?
You know, you're right in saying that, because there are a few of them that reach out to us, and the moment they talk about wanting to use our product, that's the first thing that came out of their mouth.
Yeah.
We didn't really follow up on it.
Yeah, it's exactly like you don't have to even say it, but it's just will naturally just not want to work with them.
Yeah. So like, okay, like back of the list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the same. It's the same sort of philosophy that we operate with, right? So, right from the AI recruitment CRM to even the software that we have now, the whole idea is our product is a tool.
Yeah.
Right. It's meant to streamline your process and help your employees.
Yeah.
Not replace your employees.
Yeah.
Right. Because regardless of whether it's customer service, whether it's HR, whether it's recruitment, the human touch is still necessary.
Exactly.
Right. You can't replace that.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. I think especially for us, we are in this software space, right? Sometimes people tend to think that we are all about maximizing software, maximizing AI. While that is true from a productivity perspective, I totally agree with you. Like for us, we are never about replacing the human. I always say AI is human augmentation. It's not human replacement.
Right.
Yeah, you're just conserving the best of your human energy on other things. Not on the things that robots and machines are way better at doing. Right? It just makes no sense for humans to do what a machine can do best. That's the way I look at it.
I mean, you'd be shocked to see as well, right? I mean, with even big companies or MNCs that have, let's say, a live chat or something on their website, even if it's a human, the responses are all templated.
Yep.
Right? It's the same templates that they're copy pasting, and if it's something that needs more attention, then the replies take a lot longer anyway.
Yeah, true.
So if you can just remove all that waiting for the customer, and if you use templates anyway, right? That's, I guess, the first step of these chatbots, right? Where you have templated answers, and then after that, of course, products like AeroChat come into the space where there's AI that actually tries to contextualize and understand what the customer wants. So it comes back to that natural progression, right? From your human-centric to templated automation to then AI augmentation for your customer service as well.
Yeah. True. Exactly. And I think I did a rage/ranting post on LinkedIn a couple of days ago.
I saw that.
That exactly highlights the problem, because you could have a largely human-centric customer service, but if they are not trained on the proper way to communicate with customers, and if they're not being empowered to help
Yeah.
the customers, especially a customer that is like literally like take my money, you know, I'm not even contacting them for a complaint. I'm just telling them, please take my money. It then shows us that it's not just a technology problem, it's a mindset problem.
Yep.
Which now that I'm saying it, right, kind of goes back to your point about, are we thinking about expanding out our offering to include services, right? Probably not on the BPO, but ironically for us, there could be a
Training.
ascension channel, yes, training, consultancy, because a lot of the problems that we see with customer service is not just the technology implementation, it's also the mindset. Like, you guys are not looking at customer service in the correct frame of mind. Like, you are like trying to avoid communication, whereas our whole spiel is you should engage the customer, because when your customers are more engaged, they're more satisfied, they'll buy more. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's about better communication, right? Not replacing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we just coined a tagline for our webinar. I think something like, because more communication always works better, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, more communication also, you need to have the right communication as well, right? Because more communication, I can send template after template after template, but that's going to piss my customers off even more.
Yeah, you're right.
They actually had an issue when they first came to us.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I actually just now, where you're talking about the journey, right, there was something that I wanted to come back to, because I also think that quite a fair bit of especially tech founders have this challenge. You actually, I mean, by your retelling, you pivoted twice, right? There was this original product, and then you pivoted to AI recruitment, and then pivoted to module in the end, right?
Yep.
There are a couple of layers I'm trying to understand better. One is, do you guys ever felt discouraged by the fact that you need to pivot?
Honestly, the first time, maybe a little bit. But at the same time, we realized that, hey, this first product gave us the idea for the next product. Right? Second product then gave us the insights and learnings we needed to be able to properly scale the third product. Right? And it did work that way, because in about a third of the time compared to the AI recruitment CRM, we tripled the clientele and revenue with this product.
Right.
Right. And simply because we had all these learnings from before, right? Where after I'd built the entire sales wiki, the whole onboarding process, and we ended up hiring people locally. Right. To do enterprise sales globally, which, looking back, might have been a mistake, right? Because we could have hired remote staff as well. We would have had a bit more variety in the sales team. We would have had more diverse backgrounds, meaning that everybody gets more experience from each other. Yeah. And that's then when we started building the team for Maju, right? Because when we went from enterprise to SME sales, a lot of the guys that we had before were pure enterprise salespeople, right? And for some of us, of course, it's easy to make that switch, but for a vast majority of salespeople, from what at least I've seen in my experience, it's very difficult to make that switch, right? Because with enterprise, you're doing a lot more transactional selling. It's a lot more, this is how we help you. This is how much it's going to cost. Yeah. Yes or no. Yeah. At the very core of it, that's what enterprise sales will be. Unless you're going to a much higher level, then it becomes more relationship based.
Yeah.
But with SMEs from the get-go, something we realized is that, hey, that consultative relationship based selling is the only way for you to have that sustainable growth.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So then when we switched and started building the SME sales team, right, we started looking at offshore SDRs. We had a couple account executives locally as well. And that's when it kind of that light bulb went in my head, right? Where the SDR team typically, right, when you come from an enterprise background, or even with a lot of SMEs, they think SDRs is just purely to call and book meetings, which really can't be the case, especially in Southeast Asia, right? Because the sort of culture and mindset within this region is that if I'm getting a cold call, 9 out of 10 times I'm not entertaining
for
meeting.
Sure,
right?
sure.
I'm sure yours is the same, right? As a founder, you're going to be bombarded, LinkedIn emails, cold calls.
Yeah.
And it's very, very, very difficult for any product to stand out in these avenues, right? So that's when we made that little bit of a switch in the why behind we had that offshore SDR team. And they essentially became our qualifiers, right? Because within Southeast Asia, qualifying a company and identifying the right person to speak to is the hardest thing to do,
Yeah.
right? So these SDRs, all the calls they were making, they were just sieving out information, right? Who's the right person? How does your company do this? And that's when the local team went down in person, right? So majority of our initial foundation, like the base of customers that we had, was literal door knocking, right? I'm not even kidding.
Okay.
We found the address, we had a CRM, we're like, hey, we have this information from our SDR, this office, and we sectored it, right? So the SDRs would make calls based on locations in Singapore, right? So maybe it would be maybe a week of calling within CBD, a week of calling in somewhere like Kaki Bukit and Ubi where there's so many SMEs, a week of calling in somewhere like One North where there's so many startups. And then the following week, the local team would just go down to these places, knock on the doors. And now when you knock on the door, you're not knocking and asking for a favor like, hey, I want to speak to this person.
Yeah.
You're saying, hey, I know your company does this. I'm looking for this specific person. And you call them out by name, right? I want this person and I want to talk to them. They're way more open to making that connection for you. And gatekeepers essentially become your friends that way.
Right.
Right? Because you come in as more authoritative. You come in as, I know what your company does and I know who exactly I want to speak to. And when that person comes out, it's that much more impressive, right? Hey, how do you know this about my company? Right? This is not public information. This is my internal process. How do you already know that you can help me solve this problem? Right? And then that trust starts to build that, hey, these guys know what they're talking about and they can actually help us.
Right. So,
So
and
that
then,
was the big difference between us and other sales teams that I've seen.
you know, it almost sounds like you could actually start a BPO business just on creating an SDR team, because it sounds like your filtering is really spot on.
You could. Honestly, that's something that's been, in my mind for a while, right? Because
right, yeah.
at the end of the day, that sales coaching and consulting in terms of how to set up a sales team is something that isn't really there in
Yeah.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah, because I mean, I think you mean it right. I mean, and I'm glad that it has done well for you, but you hit on the spot, because I think not just in Southeast Asia, I think across the business landscape, the biggest problem for any business, any startup, right? And when you start a business, the number one thing is, where am I going to find my customers?
Yeah.
Right? And that's why we name our podcast "Where Are My Customers?"
Where are my
Exactly. We
customers?
are discussing about what are the struggles, the tribulations that founders have, and all the passages of fire that you have to jump through, right? Just to be able to put yourself in front of customers. And that is a big problem. I'm sure you and I, we know a lot of people who build fantastic products.
Of course.
But they don't see the light of day because they have a struggle with sales and marketing and putting themselves right in front of their, target audience.
So we've got I guess this is pretty common, right? But within Maju, we've got this philosophy where if you're part of the company, you're either building the product
Or
or
selling
you're
it.
shipping the product,
Okay.
right? There's nothing else that is required in a startup other than these two. Right? And in terms of building the product, our CTO and his team, they are insanely good, right? Any feedback we get from customers, any new features, any changes that we need, these guys are brilliant at what they do, right? So that's where we also avoided that very typical sales versus tech internal struggle that most companies go through. And on the sales side, honestly, the base of it, if you're starting a company and you don't have a established sales process, without that initial hustle, you will never succeed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I say hustle, it's not just constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? You have to iterate. You have to try new things. You have to do things like really going down and knocking on doors every single day for months. And that way you build not only your network, but that lead gen is so much more effective, right? Because people remember who you are because they've seen you and they're like, hey, I don't usually get HR tech people coming to my door. Right? Usually that's an email or a LinkedIn message or a phone call.
Right.
And all these other online channels, it's so much easier to say no or block you or just ignore the message.
Yeah.
As compared to now, if I'm standing right in front of you at your door,
Right.
it's much harder to say no.
But at the same time, you guys have expanded beyond Singapore, right? So
Yep.
you are in a few cities.
That's right.
Does that on the ground game of door to door still work in this sense? Because I mean, it could work for you because you're in Singapore and you have some people in Singapore that's doing that. But the moment you start going, regional and even global, like that wouldn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. Honestly, this is a very Singapore-centric style of doing it.
Yeah.
Simply because everything is so condensed, right? Even if you look at, let's say, Malaysia or Indonesia, right, where majority of our users outside Singapore are right now.
Yeah.
Everything is so far apart.
Right.
Impossible to go and knock on doors every day.
Yeah.
Right? You spend more time traveling between doors than actually talking to people.
Yeah.
So for us, in terms of the regional expansion, right, we got very lucky with our foundation of customers, where these guys happen to be multi-regional SMEs.
Right.
So either they've got a remote team somewhere else already, or they've got multiple entities in the region, right? So that gave us the experience with dealing with local compliance or the difference in culture between countries as well. And then from there, you can then build on and maybe even use your basic online channels, right? And be like, hey, your competitor is using us.
Right.
Maybe you should consider this as well because we're helping them do this. Right. And then when we go into the service side of it, it becomes that much more valuable because if you're thinking about, let's say, just a payroll function, right? If you've got 3 different entities in 3 different countries, that's either 3 different HR or finance teams that you need, or you'll have one person who's really drowning trying to understand local compliance in all the different places. Then you open yourself up to things like human error, compliance mistakes, continuity errors. And the service coming in, being able to service all these regions with local consultants and people who have been running payroll in these countries for years, completely removes all these issues, right? And at the end of the day, it's always cheaper to outsource your payroll than hire someone in-house to do it.
Oh, okay. Right.
So
okay.
It's very similar to AeroChat's sell, right? Where you're trying to use the cost and make your team more efficient. It's exactly the same logic with us for the service side of things.
Yeah. I guess when you implement technology at a certain right angle, it just beats out all the labor costs. I have people telling me that an AI chatbot probably wouldn't work in places like like Philippines or Cambodia or where the cost of labor is extremely low, right?
Yeah.
Or even India, right? Extremely low. I'm like, no. We calculated you take the lowest cost of a human service agent.
Yeah.
The monthly pay is still easily 10, 20 times higher than the subscription you're paying.
Oh, it's still that big a difference.
It's still that big a difference. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Because assuming you pay someone $200-300 US per month for one human service agent, right? How many customer inquiries do you think that human customer service rep can handle every single day?
Yeah.
20, 30, 50?
You need more people as you scale.
Yeah, you need more people, right? But an AI chatbot can handle infinitely. I mean, of course, as your volume goes up, you pay a higher subscription.
Of course,
right?
of course.
But the scale factor is totally different. It's close to infinite.
Yeah.
Right? And then so when you work it out, even if you have scale, even when you have more customers, more traffic coming in, and you scale 10 times, the 10 times scaling factor of an AI chatbot technology is still way cheaper than your human agents. And then there's also the quality. There's also a quality issue, right? If you have those very basic, very junior human service rep, yes, they might be more affordable. But what about the training cost? Quality, right? The training, the consistency of being able to pull out the right information to respond.
Yep.
Time zone issues, language issues, right? All those goes away the moment you implement a AI chatbot facility.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's immeasurable in that sense. Yeah.
I guess in terms of like from a customer standpoint as well, right? As we go into more social media, more AI, all these things are becoming more and more common.
Yep.
Even in places that are like your developing countries that weren't so tech savvy before. Yep. The generations coming up now are becoming more and more tech savvy.
Yes.
Regardless of where you are.
Yes.
Right? So people expect faster responses.
Yep.
People expect better service without having to wait for it.
Exactly. Yep.
And you can't do that with human support.
You can't. Even for some of our smaller SME users, right? And they are like in Philippines, Indonesia, e-commerce businesses, they are handling like 600 inquiries a day. How many
Lot.
humans are you going to deploy to do that? You can't.
Yeah.
It's a crazy amount. So even if like every human is more affordable, that scalability is just simply not there.
Yeah. Yeah. When you lay down the numbers like that, it really makes a lot more sense, right?
Yeah. I think, now that you pointed out, right? I suppose for us, the bigger challenge, ironically, is still education, because,
Yeah.
until they know the disparity between the numbers, like they don't quite understand why there's a need for it. Yeah.
I mean, in that sense, okay, so this is my sales brain
Mm.
thinking interaction, right? Where when we first started both our AR recruitment and Maju, we've had like a little thing that we've built where companies can just key in their headcount or what they do and what their average cost is. So we don't even estimate their cost, right? We ask them to key in their own cost or their own estimate. And we immediately show them the ROI on our product. Right? So I don't know, just spitballing here, right? But I would think that something like that would work brilliantly for you guys if you have something like that on your website, right? Where, how many queries do you have per day? How many queries can one of your agents handle per day? And then you just show them that math. Right? Like even assuming the lowest possible salary for your customer service agents, this is your ROI. So if you're saying, let's say $200, right? Like you mentioned earlier, in some developing country, and you find some really great customer service agent, lowest low is $200. And if the customer is currently paying more than that, and you're already seeing a 10 times difference, that becomes a real no-brainer to use your product, right?
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. And we had this in mind. This tool of yours, this is demo. Exactly. We are kind of building something similar, a very simple calculator just put on our website. I think the challenge with running a lean team is right now we are kind of more focused on shipping certain features requested by our use cases, because that just represents upfront money.
Yeah, 100%. This is more the long game, right? And
I mean,
do you think that that's an issue that most startups face? Because I mean, it sounds like you're facing it, and we definitely did, where in a lean team of people that actually know what they're doing, the ideas are limitless, but your time is limited.
Yes.
Right?
I would say right now for us, the challenge for us right now is a bit weird.
Okay.
I think the moment we are able to show our product and show the costing, like what you mentioned, right? It's a no-brainer. It really becomes a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I think for us right now, and we are thinking obviously not just about Singapore. We right from the get-go, we are now thinking regional and even global, right? Because again, it's a software. We don't really need to think about being local.
And you don't even have to worry about compliance or anything like that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But having said that, all our customer data are within PDPA compliance, because that is one issue that was brought up by some of our users, whereby because their customers would send in their contact details like email and phone number and all this, right? So that's like kind of the first thing they'll ask. Oh, what's your PDPA like? So these are all encrypted address. It's all encrypted in database, so no worries about that. But I think going back to what you're saying just now, right now, I would say, in all transparency, I think our challenge right now is getting in front of our target audience, which sounds ironic, because our primary audience are e-commerce merchants.
Yep.
And apparently, it's hard to find them for some reason.
Really? Okay.
Like, okay, for example, right? These days a lot of entrepreneurs and startup founders, we are doing a lot of personal branding on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Amazing place to build connections, to build authority, except that a lot of them are not e-commerce business owners. So I may have a lot of or increasing awareness about who I am and what we do as a brand, LinkedIn is more effective for me to establish authority, thought leadership, and probably potential partnerships.
Right.
But in terms of direct customers, actually
so
not so much. I mean, it of course worked wonders for my digital marketing agency side, the SEO, the podcast, but that one works wonderfully, right? But for AeroChat, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. So we have a very clear message. We are just trying to figure out exactly where are the channels where most of our target audience are hiding. That's our number one problem. Yeah. If we can punch that, I think we are good.
Yeah, that's I guess that's the age-old problem for any startup or SME, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's the title of the podcast as well, right? Where are my customers? So
No, that literally was our problem. We were like brainstorming, like how on earth are we going to get our customers? Like, where are my customers?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of finding where to get your customers, right? That's that one thing that if you can figure out,
Yes.
scale is never an issue anymore.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's probably like, with the guests that I bring on to talk about their business and talk about their sharing. I think that's ultimately and which also, in a sense, and I probably shared this with you privately before, when we first created this podcast, the main driver was to create a channel to bring attention to ourselves.
Yeah.
And by and by that, bring attention to the product that we are selling. Right. So it was meant to be an attention channel for us. But as we have all these conversations with, entrepreneurs, founders like yourself and other marketers, agency owners that come on, the channel sort of took on a life of its own. Because now we are having conversations about various aspects of how a business really can put themselves out there. Whether is it a brand positioning, whether is it a marketing narrative, or whether is it some very tactical, SDR methods like what you have shared, right? And I think a lot of businesses probably need to hear such information. On one hand, to maybe have new insights on how they can do their things better. On the other hand, maybe someone else is also have done that, or someone else have also gone through that. I'm not alone in screwing this up.
Yeah. I mean, just knowing that other people have made the same mistakes or other people are having similar ideas, right?
Yeah.
It is that validation you need as a founder to just be like, hey, you know what? This is the right direction to be in. Because I mean, you would know this as well as anyone, right? Being a founder means always having that uncertainty.
Yes.
Right. So that validation always helps. Okay, you know what? I'm on the right path.
Yeah, but interesting, right? So you talk about this, like at this point, from all sides, from all those of things, and what you just shared, Maju is on the up and up trajectory, right? You guys are looking at some form of acquisition and growing and expanding. Do you still get that sense? Do you still have that anxiety? Do you still worry about one day you wake up and all things blows to shit?
Oh, 100%. I don't know. I personally feel like that never goes away, right? Because it could be some change in the geopolitical landscape. Something happens, some change in some law. Maybe some new AI shows up.
Right.
That's way better than anything that's in the market right now. Right? It's happened with the whole DeepSeek thing where all stopped coming to the moment it was released.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no way to predict these things.
Yeah.
So that fear, that anxiety, I don't think ever really goes away.
Yeah.
It's just you gotta keep pushing while you can. Right. And if something like that happens, that's where honestly that experience we've had pivoting a couple of times.
Yes.
It gives us that base that, okay, even if something happens, we know we can take what we have now with Maju and maybe do something else with it.
Yes, that's interesting. Keith from C Clarity, I was speaking to him in an earlier session.
Yeah.
I probably the same thing. I think for C Clarity themselves, they have also pivoted a couple of times before settling on C Clarity.
Okay.
And Keith was like, yeah, like, you know, we are a weird bunch of people who likes to just, you know, go straight to torture ourselves, have all these unnecessary panic attacks, and, you know, for what?
I mean, do you feel like at the very core of it, it's just because you want to leave something behind?
In a certain way, yes. I think for me personally, the sense of legacy is probably not as strong as how you describe yours. I think for me at least, with AeroChat, I think I'm more about making a statement.
Okay.
There's a certain philosophy, there's a certain ideology that I believe in when it comes to business, when it comes to business communication.
Yep.
And I find that a lot of what is in the market are not presenting that ideology in the way that I would present it.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's how I look at it. Because that, you know, again, just within AI itself, there are way many other forms of, you know, deploying AI, right? And there are people in, you know, crypto and web and all sorts of other AI and robotics and that, right? And let's be honest, quite a fair bit of them are way more lucrative than whatever, you know, we are doing. But the message doesn't resonate. Like, despite being in tech for so long, I couldn't understand the appeal of Web3. I mean, honestly, you know, honest to God, I just don't, right? I appreciate the usefulness of blockchain as underlying technology, but I don't understand crypto at all. I mean, silly me, like, you know, that's why we are not multi-millionaires, right? But I don't understand it. And if you tell me that even though it's lucrative, I can't see myself going into a crypto project. You know, it's
Yep.
just not a statement that I would make. So I think for me personally, it's more about I have a certain ideology of how technology can and should improve business communications. And this is probably how I want to make that statement, is through the product that I make, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, from what you're saying here, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's still, to me, because that's what I had in my head. It feels like it's just a different form of legacy,
Could be,
right?
right?
Right, where
Yeah,
you want
yeah.
to make a statement that makes sense to you, where
Mhm.
you think you can do better than anything else in the market, and that's why you're focused on what you're doing with AeroChat.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now, ideally speaking, when people talk about AI chatbots, customer
yeah.
service chatbots, you want AeroChat to be the first thing that comes to mind.
Yes,
And if
yes.
you've done that, you've left behind a nice legacy,
Oh, that's a nice way to think about it.
right?
Cool. Yes,
That's
yes.
that's that's what I thought. That's the legacy you want to leave behind, right?
Right.
And it's the same way where now when you think of Maju,
Yep.
right? Of course, after today, hopefully, maybe I've given you a bit more insights into why and what Maju is all about. But
Right.
the whole thing was, when you think of Maju, you think, oh, chat-based HR, right? And if we can do this with everybody we speak to, where they have one or two things that really stand out to them about what we've built,
Yep.
then you've left behind a legacy that people will remember.
Yes, I think, yep. Make a good point. True.
This is
Awesome, man.
all about that legacy for me.
Yeah, I think at the heart of it, right? People like us, you know, we build products. I think you're right. There's a certain message that is in our core that we really want to share with the world. And I think whatever product that we iterate and push out to the world is just a vehicle for us to express our
Exactly.
underlying message, right?
Yeah. So yeah, there was a very apt way that one of my friends I was talking to put it, right? And he's like, it
Yeah.
sounds like you'd rather be the machine than a gear in the machine.
Mm,
Right? And I don't know,
right.
that really stuck with me, right? Because even if I move away from the startup space, even if I move into something that's more being part of a bigger company and whatnot,
Yeah.
I don't think I could just be part of a single function.
Mm,
Right? I don't know, I get too restless and I start losing my mind. Right? I want to do more, and like it needs to be maybe overlapping functions, right? It has to
yeah.
be something
Yeah.
that affects more people.
Yeah.
So that's where this came up, right? I thought it was a very apt way of putting it.
Yeah, I can definitely see, like, I mean, even if you go into a bigger organization, you probably still have that, then from an entrepreneur, it becomes an intrapreneur for you,
Exactly.
leading some sort of change within an organization. I totally can see that, man.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Awesome. And with that, I think we have a really good session today, my friend. Thank you for
Really enjoyed
being
that.
on a podcast. I got a feeling we definitely have more in the tank for an episode 2, probably in the second season.
Anytime.
All right. Awesome, man. Thanks for your time.
Hey guys, if you enjoy this podcast, subscribe and share it with your friends. We drop new episodes every week, so stay tuned. See you in the next one.